right, I'm going to keep doing some of these pseudepigraphal and extra canonical sorts of deep dives, and sometimes it'll be about a topic, and sometimes it'll just be about a single work that is found. Now, this one, like a lot of the ones that we find, is from some unknown Egyptians. It's an early Coptic work. Like all of these other pseudepigrapha, we have to take them with a grain of salt. These are considered, at least, they're not in the main canon, so we can at least assume that there is a fictional sort of storytelling element of it. But we have to also realize that some of these things don't get into the canon because they don't fit the paradigm, and we assume, or the people who made those decisions assumed that people were taking like creative liberties with the story and whatnot. So when we look at these things, the way I look at a lot of the extra canonical writings like this is I kind of see it as a Sunday school teacher that might go off the rails at times. Right? We've all had those kinds of teachers where we're looking for truths, and there might be some truths there. And especially as we look with discernment based on the things that we know are canonical, we can find some really interesting things, especially when these are things that came to light much later and were not accessible to Joseph Smith and kind of follow along with the doctrines, and they're found in these other works. Now, this one might have, the jury's out for finding out when the original writing was done with this. A lot of this seems to be word of mouth, but it is referenced in the Jewish Talmud, elements of what is found in this story, as well as the later Quran. A lot of, or some people will date it as early as 300 years before the birth of Christ, which makes it very interesting because there is messianic language everywhere, and it very explicitly calls, God tells Adam that he will come down and take on a body of flesh and bone and suffer for the sins of Adam and Eve. Now, this is a very interesting story because this begins where the Adam and Eve portion of Genesis leaves off. So we get some extra things. Now we have some stuff in the Pearl of Great Price, and that is where, that's where the best telling of this is, but this is long. So I want to go into maybe 15 or so of these chapters, just kind of glancing through it, reading fully with some of them. They're not long, but as you can see, there's a whole bunch that we can find. And this was published. It was translated and published into English in the 1920s, I believe. So it starts off, and I'll jump around a little bit, but it starts off, they're talking about this sea, this crystal sea of pure water where you can go into it and even you can become clean, and the white of the whiteness thereof. And it seems like it comes from the tree that is there. And anyway, it's, even if you were all the way dark, you would have your sins and things forgiven, which obviously kind of goes counter with, like, right away with what we believe that it is by Christ alone. And immediately we get this like magic sort of water. But I mean, at the same time, we have baptism. And so we do kind of have echoes of that sort of magic water, even though it's not exactly that we just enter water for no reason, like stumble upon it, and then like we have sins forgiven or anything like that. It's not that at all. But interesting way to start it. And Uh, they're going to plant Adam far away from the garden, Adam and Eve, so that they don't smell the garden and, don't, it doesn't rub it in their face too much, like smelling the old Eden barbecue or whatever. I guess there wouldn't be barbecue in Eden, right? Uh, Adam and Eve faint when they leave the garden. God sends his word, again, his word to comfort them, and we will see that language all over. Just in short, we will find things about, is it in this one? It very much is about this going from a light state to a dark state, change in their bodies, change in their, it's their first steps, because they lived in this perpetual light and they had not known darkness. So it's interesting how they will kind of have these first lessons and trying to figure out like their, take these first steps out of here. And I find it fascinating. Let's see. Raised from their fallen state. Like they keep grieving, obviously. And this is interesting. God said to Adam, I have ordained on this earth days and years, and you and your descendants will live and walk in them until the days and years are fulfilled, when I shall send the word that created you, and against which you have transgressed, the word that made you come out of the garden and raised you from when you were fallen. And it'll be fulfilled in 5.5 days. And Adam freaks out, like, oh crap, 5.5 days and the world's going to end? It's like, no, that means 5,000 and a half thousand, right? And then, so kind of interesting. Now let's start reading. I mean, all this is interesting, but I don't want to read all of it. But let's start here. Chapter 4, as you can see, Adam and Eve mourn over their changed conditions. But Adam and Eve cried for having come out of the garden, their first home. And indeed, when Adam looked at his flesh that was altered, he cried bitterly, he and Eve, over what they had done. And they walked and went down into the cave of treasures. Like their bodies were once very different than it was. And this very much echoes LDS theology. And as they came to it, Adam cried over himself and said to Eve, look at this cave that is to be our prison in our world and a place of punishment. So they've gone to this place of light, and they are gone into, or they're taken into a cave where it's interesting because they are both going from physical light to physical darkness, just as they are going from a type of spiritual light into a spiritual sort of darkness. What is it compared with the garden? That is its narrowness compared with the space of the other. Oh, what is its narrowness compared to the space of the other? Like, it's not very good. What is this rock by the side of those groves? What is the gloom of the cavern and compared with the light of the garden? What is the overhanging ledge of the rock? Like Eve's understandably wanting to know what this new home is going to be like, where she's going to be bringing up children. And it's not very good, right? It's dark, it's cold, it's dirty. What is the soil of the cave compared to the garden land? And Adam said to Eve, oh, this earth strewn with stones, and that planted with delicious fruit trees. And Adam said to Eve, look at your eyes and at mine, which before beheld angels praising in heaven, and they too without ceasing. But now we do not see as we did. Our eyes have become of flesh. They cannot see like they used to see before. Adam said to Eve, what is our body today compared to what it was in former days when we lived in the garden? After this, Adam did not want to enter the cave under the overhanging rock, like this precarious rock that could fall on him. Nor would he ever want to enter it. But he bowed to God's orders and said to himself, Unless I enter the cave, I shall again be a aggressor. This part's interesting. Look at the very start here. Then Adam and Eve entered the cave and stood praying in their own tongue, unknown to us, but which they knew well. Now that echoes of this Adamic language, like purer than any other language. I mean, that could also just mean that they just had a different language than what would come later, but interesting note. And as they prayed, Adam raised his eyes and saw the rock and the roof of the cave and covered him overhead. This prevented him from seeing either heaven or God's creatures. Right? So they're like this kind of spiritual and physical barrier. So he cried and beat his chest hard until he dropped and was as dead. Like, this just reminds me of like little children. Like they have the natures in a way. It seemed like little children where they just haven't become accustomed to darkness at all. So this is just such a fall into a new place of just dangers and cold. And Eve sat crying, for she believed he was dead. Like he drops onto his chest as if dead, and she's groping around, spreading her hands towards him, appealing to him for and groping was the wrong word. Appealing to him for mercy and pity, and said, "O God, forgive me my sin and the sin which I committed, and don't remember it against me." Like, and she'll be like, "Well, this was my fault. Why don't you put this on me, right? Don't take away his soul right now, but let him live, that he may stand after the measure of his repentance, and do your will as before his death." Like, she's feeling this guilt for what she, guilt for Adam. "And if you do not bring him back to life, then, O God, take my own soul, that I be like him, and leave me not in this dungeon." Like, these two are one. I guess that's a better way. These two are one. And in all the stories, these pseudepigraphal stories of Adam and Eve, like, they just can't manage without each other. Okay? "Take away my own soul, that I might be like him, and leave me not alone in the dungeon, one and alone. For I could not stand alone in this world, but with him only. For you, O God, caused him to fall asleep, and took a bone from the side, and restored the flesh in the place of it by your divine power." Just seeing which one we were on. Let's see. "And you took me, the bone, and make me a woman bright like him, with heart, reason, and speech, and in flesh like to his own. And you made me after the likeness of his looks, by your power, mercy, and power. O Lord, I and he are one. And you, O God, are our Creator. You are he who made us both in one day. Therefore, O God, give him life, that he may be with me in the strange land while we live in it on account of our transgression. But if you will not give him life, then take me, even me, like him, that we may both die the same day." And Eve cried bitterly and fell on our father Adam from her great sorrow. But God looked at them, for they had killed themselves through great grief. It looks like they're, for he decided to raise them and comfort them. He therefore sent his word again to them, that they should stand and be raised immediately. "And the Lord said to Adam and Eve, You transgressed of your own free will until you came out of the garden in which I had placed you. Of your own free will have you transgressed through your desire for divinity, greatness, and an exalted state, such as I have, so that I deprived you of the bright nature in which you then were. And I made you come out of the garden to this land rough and full of trouble." He doesn't say, like, it's just so interesting that we have this as the motivation. And he doesn't say you're not going to ever get that, but that since you wanted this, to be like him, like the Lord, that they have deprived him of the bright nature and brought them into this rough and tumble world, and it's like the first steps, but it's not the end. And the Lord will continue by making these other promises that let them know that the story is not finished yet. If only you had not transgressed my commandment and had kept my law and had not eaten by the fruit of the tree which I told you not to come near. And there were fruit trees in the garden better than that one. Like, why did you have to do that one? But of course, when God says to not do something, Satan swoops in and it just, But the wicked Satan did not keep his faith and had no good intent towards me, that although I had created him, he considered me to be useless and sought the Godhead for himself. For this I hurled him down from heaven so that he could not remain in his first estate. Isn't that interesting to have Godhead in first estate in this one part here? It was he who made the tree appear pleasant in your eyes until you ate of it by believing his words. Thus you have transgressed my commandment, and therefore I have brought on you all these sorrows. For I am God, the Creator, who, when I created my creatures, did not intend to destroy them, but after they had sorely roused my anger, I punished them with grievous plagues until they repent. But if, on the contrary, they still continue hardened in their transgression, they shall be under a curse forever. Maybe another one where I think we'll read this whole one too. It's interesting. When Adam and Eve heard the words of God, they cried and sobbed yet more, and they strengthened their hearts because they now felt that the Lord was to them like a father and a mother. And for this very reason, they cried before him and sought mercy from him. Like they're adults, but they have it's coming across very much in the nature of children that kind of have to learn consequences and haven't really had that, it's their first encounter with it. And God had pity on them and said, "Oh, Adam, I have made my covenant with you. I've made my covenant with you, and I will not turn from it. Neither will I let you return to my garden until my covenant of the great 5.5 days is fulfilled." Like, it's not over yet. Just trust me. But you can't be back in the garden yet. Then Adam said to God, "O Lord, you created us and made us fit to be in the garden, and before I transgressed, you made all beasts come to me that I should name them. Your grace was then on me, and I named every one according to your mind, and you made them all subject to me. I have transgressed your commandment. All beasts will rise against me and devour me." And then, he does this thing where they come and they pay homage to Adam. The Lord makes them come back, just as they did with in the Garden of Eden, and temporarily pay homage, except for the serpent against God was angry, and it did not come to Adam with the beasts. Chapter 8, the bright nature of man is taken away. Then Adam cried and said, "O God, when we lived in the garden and our hearts were lifted up, we saw the angels that sang praises in heaven. But now we can't see like we used to. No, when we entered the cave, all creation became hidden from us." Then God, the Lord, said to Adam, "When you were under subjugation to me, you had a bright nature within you, and for that reason could you see things far away. But after your transgression, your bright nature was withdrawn from you, and it was not left to you to see things far away, but only near at hand, after the ability of the flesh, for it is brutish." When Adam and Eve had heard these words from God, they went their way, praising and worshiping him with a sorrowful heart. Isn't that interesting? praising and worshiping him with a sorrowful heart. And God ceased to commune with them. They talk about the water of the tree, like how when they were in the garden, they didn't have to eat or drink, and then they figure that they need water, and they like jump right into this river and almost drown because they're just, Adam doesn't really want to drink of the water. Eve's just kind of she's an interesting character in this, for sure. And Adam said, let's go to chapter 10, start at 4 maybe, like after God raised them from the water. And again said, isn't that interesting again, right? When that is, maybe we shouldn't skip that, but think of the allusions to, or the parallels to going into the water as if dead, right? With baptism. Isn't that interesting? And Adam said after he was raised, "O God, while we were in the garden, we did not require or care for this water. But since we came to this land, we cannot do without it." And I think that has to do with the difference between like the living water and the bitter water, where bitter water, you always need more. Living water, like one time and it would be enough or something. I mean, there's probably lots of elements to that. Let me know what you think. But let's see. Then God said to Adam, "While you were under my command and were a bright angel, you knew not this water. And now that you have transgressed my commandment, you cannot do without water, wherein to wash your body and make it grow. For it is now like of that of the beasts." Make it grow. I always have giants on my mind. That's just whatever. Okay. And for it is now like that of the beasts, and it is in want of water. Then Adam and Eve heard these words from God. They cried a bitter cry, and Adam entreated God to let him return to the garden and look at it a second time. But God said to Adam, "I have made you a promise. When that promise is fulfilled, I will bring you back into the garden." Here's the promise, right? I will bring you back into the garden, you and your righteous descendants. And God ceased to commune with Adam. Like, if you always have temples on your mind, you just are looking for this stuff all the time, and like coming back to the tree, coming back to the garden, having this reverse order of what happened with Adam and Eve kicked out of that realm, and then us being, a celestial realm, and it seems like they live in the terrestrial paradise, and then telestial, and we make our way back. Very interesting with Adam and Eve. And it just so, like, we have such a different view in some ways on Adam, and certainly on Eve as well. Interesting. A few more. Let's start with 3 maybe. "And both Adam and Eve went away from the water and drank none of it at all, but came and entered into the cave of treasures," this dark place once more. But when... Is this the one I was wanting to do with this? Yeah. But when in it Adam could not see Eve, but only heard the noise she made. Neither could she see Adam, but neither the noise he made. And I imagine that when they saw each other in this light, that I don't know if it would be true, but I imagine that they could understand each other and really, really know each other in a much more personal and profound way before the ways of the flesh kind of muddied things up, right? "Then Adam cried in deep affliction and beat his chest, and he got up and said to Eve, 'Where are you?'" And when I first went through this, because I had read another Coptic version of this, like this is where Adam and Eve, like they were virgins coming into this cave, and they weren't virgins coming out of it. It doesn't do that here in this one. When Adam cried in deep affliction and beat his chest, he got up and said to Eve, "Where are you?" And she said to him, "Look, I am standing in this darkness." And then he said to her, "Remember the bright nature in which we lived when we lived in the garden? O Eve, remember the glory that rested on us in the garden. O Eve, remember the trees that overshadowed us in the garden while we moved among them, like to protect them from the sun. O Eve, remember that while we were in the garden, we knew neither night nor day. Think of the tree of life from below." I guess not from the sun. "Think of the tree of life from below which flowed the water, and that shed luster over us. Remember, O Eve, and remember land and brightness thereof. Think of how think of that garden in which was no darkness while we lived in it. Whereas no sooner did we come into the cave of treasures than darkness surrounded us all around." Like this first one of these first lessons, at least according to this in this story, is this discovery of physical and spiritual darkness, and really putting them both together in this moment to experience this. And like I find that very deep and interesting, even though it like we know these stories sort of, but we don't know exactly what happens with all these details after the garden. But I just think this cave of treasures things that shows up in a lot of these different works, and we figured it must come from this or some version of this story. This cave of treasures things is very interesting. And we also find, as a note, they're buried in Hebron, but there's also some things where it sounds like they're buried, like some things have them buried at Golgotha, like where Christ was crucified, right? Entombed, and he was entombed in a cave. Whereas no sooner did we come into the cave of treasures than darkness surrounded us all around until we can no longer see each other, and all pleasure of this life has come to an end. And this is when I thought, okay, well, not all the pleasures, right? And that's how it kind of keeps going in some of these. Let's see. Yeah, and they think that this darkness is going to just continue on forever. That they have lost the light and they're going to be in this perpetual darkness. Remember? And think of how relevant that is as a consequence to this transgression. So they are having this, they're not told otherwise, but this is their first night and they have no idea that light will return. Adam beat himself and threw himself down to the cave again and lay there as if he was dead. Like, they're doing that a lot. But the merciful Lord looked on the death of Adam again, and the word of God came to Adam and raised him from his death and opened Eve's mouth that she might speak. And Adam stood in the cave and said, "O God, why has light departed from us and darkness covered us? Why did you leave us in the long darkness? Why do you plague us like this? And this darkness, O Lord, where was it before it covered us?" Like, how come we hadn't ever known this? And this is a part of the knowledge of good and evil that is being taught, but it's been taught in a way that they would be able to immediately comprehend this antithesis of light. Like, where was this? It is because of this that we can't see each other. For so long as we were in the garden, we neither saw nor even knew what darkness is. I was not hidden from Eve, neither was she hidden from me, until now that she cannot see me, and no darkness came over us to separate us from each other. But she and I were both in one bright light. I saw her and she saw me, and yet now, since we came into this cave, darkness has covered us and separated us from each other. And think of that in temple sorts of language, where like together in a room, but not totally together, right? Together but not, until until the fulfillment of it all, when Adam and Eve and their descendants would be returned. So that I do not see her, and she does not see me. O Lord, will you then plague us with this darkness? Again, he's like. Actually, let's read some of this. So when God, who is merciful and full of pity, heard Adam's voice, he said to them, "O Adam, as so long as the good angel was obedient to me, a bright light rested on him as host." And then like whenever someone transgresses, they get thrown into darkness, and they become as darkness. Like they have a spiritual darkness because of that absence of the bright light that is with them. But in my mercy, and this is when he's going to teach them why this has happened. But in my mercy, I have made you as you are. When you transgressed my commandment, O Adam, I drove you from the garden and made you come forth into this land and commanded you to live in this cave, and darkness covered you, as it did cover him who transgressed my commandment. Thus, O Adam, and it's interesting, he's going to bring him into the cave. Like, they could probably go outside and see the stars and things and be like, oh, there is some light. But they're just brought right into this cave where they will not see anything. And as obedient Adam and Eve, they go and do it. And they don't know any better. At least at this moment, it seems like, right? Thus, O Adam, has the night deceived you? Hold on. Let me make sure I didn't skip. I drove you from the garden. Transgress my command. Yeah. Thus, O Adam, has the night deceived you? It is not to last forever, but is only of 12 hours. When it is over, daylight will return. Sigh not, therefore, neither be moved, and say not in your heart that this darkness is long and drags on wearily, and say not in your heart that I plague you with it. Strengthen your heart and be not afraid. Like, this is their first act of courage. Light will come up. Just hold on a few hours. It'll be here. This darkness is not a punishment, but, O Adam, I have made the day, and have placed the sun in it to give light, in order that you and your children should do your work. For I knew you would sin and transgress. This is interesting. I knew you would sin and transgress and come into this land, yet I wouldn't force you, nor be heard over you, nor shut up, nor doomed you through your fall, nor through your coming out. Like, he's making it known that this is definitely because of their own agency. What chapter are we on? We'll finish here soon. For I made you of the light, and I willed you to bring children of light from you, and like to you. But you did not keep my commandment one day, until I had finished the creation and blessed everything in it. Let's see. You knew Satan, and who deceived himself, and he also deceived you. Like, told you not to go to the fruit thereof, nor taste it, or even sit under it, or to yield to it. Very interesting. Look at this. So this is interesting. We'll do two more. The earliest prophecy of the coming of Christ. Now, obviously, with the Old Testament, we have encoded sorts of allusions to Christ through, especially with Isaiah, who's quoted, like, the Book of Mormon loves Isaiah. So does Jesus Christ, who quoted Isaiah a whole bunch and said, oh, didn't Isaiah, we see all this messianic stuff in Isaiah. But if we go into the thought process of maybe Deuteronomists who tried to strip away needs for a Messiah over sin, like a Messiah to save them from sin, certainly if it was regarding a God coming down to do that, they would have seen that as maybe heretical. At least some would have seen it as that. Remember, a Torah, we have a Torah. We have the law, and the law will set us free. And Jesus came down and pointed at all these different different spots that kind of prove, calls to his own nature. And it's very interesting that we would find this, especially if it is written before Christ, or the story survived from before. But, we'll never know, I guess. Then Adam said to God, "O Lord, take you my soul, and let me not see this gloom anymore, or remove me to some place where there is no darkness." But God, the Lord, said to Adam, "Indeed, I say to you, this darkness will pass from you." This is like such a beautiful lesson. Even if it is just pseudepigraphal, like it's like you think of The Chosen, where they stick words in the apostles and in Jesus's mouth, and it still has the spirit of like those stories, and like I find that here with this lesson, right? "Indeed, I say unto you, this darkness will pass from you. Every day I have determined for you until the fulfillment of my covenant, when I will save you and bring you back again into the garden, into the house of light you long for, in which there is no darkness. I will bring you to it in the kingdom of heaven." Like, the temples are so awesome. The Bible is so awesome too. Starts with a tree, ends with a tree, and like no one would long for going back to Eden quite like Adam and Eve. We all get to go, right? When like that's the promise that, that's what we're longing for as well. Again said, and for everything that it represents and stuff, right? Being in the Lord's presence. Again said God to Adam, "All this misery that you have been made to take on yourself because of your transgression will not free you from the hand of Satan, and will not save you." Like, you're not taking your own whips. Like, you're not going to take a punishment for a while, and then because of that punishment be let in, and then, that's not going to do it. "But I will." Yeah, let me just read that again. "All this misery that you have been made to take on yourself because of your transgression will not free you from the hand of Satan, and will not save you. But I will. When I shall come down from heaven, and will become flesh of your descendants, and take on myself the infirmity from which you suffer, then the darkness that covered you in this cave shall cover me in the grave, when I am in the flesh of your descendants. And I, who am without years, shall be subject to the reckoning of years, of times, of months, and of days. And I shall be reckoned as one of the sons of men in order to save you." And God ceased to commune with Adam. Last one, there's just this tiny little thing. "Then Adam and Eve cried and sorrowed by reason of God's word to them, that they should not return to the garden until the fulfillment of the days decreed on them, but mostly because God had told them that he should suffer for their salvation." The first sunrise. Should we read this just for the heck of it? Chapter of the serpent. Might as well. "After this, Adam and Eve continued to stand in the cave, praying and crying until the morning dawned on them. And then they saw the light return to them. They retained their fear. They retrained from fear and strengthened their hearts." Like they're growing. "And Adam began to come out of the cave. And when he came to the mouth of it and stood and turned to face towards the east, and saw the sunrise and growing rays, and felt the heat thereof on his body, he was afraid of it, and thought in his heart that the flame come forth to plague him." Like, this is a new challenge. Like, this is a different kind of light. Then he cried and beat his chest again. Fell on the ground on his face, made his request, saying, "O Lord, plague me not, neither consume me, nor yet take me away my life from the earth." And he thought the Son was God. For he thought the Son was God. Because while he was in the garden and heard the voice of God and the sound he made in the garden and feared, Adam never saw the brilliant light of the sun, neither did its flaming heat touch his body. Therefore, because they were under the trees of the garden, therefore he was afraid of the sun when flaming rays of it reached him. He thought God meant to plague him therewith all the days that he had decreed him. But for Adam said also in his thoughts, as God did not plague us with darkness, behold, he has caused the sun to rise and to plague us with burning heat. And while he was thinking like this in his heart, the word of God came to him and said, "Oh, Adam, get up on your feet." Probably like that, right? Probably in a nicer way, but you know, it is just like a parent. "This sun is not God." Right? Probably not exactly like that too, but maybe a little bit. "But it has been created to give light by day, of which I spoke to you in the cave, remember, saying that the dawn would come and there would be light by day. But I am God who comforted you in the night." And God ceased to commune with Adam. Cool, hey? So that was, let's see, 16 chapters. You can see 16 here. And then there's a whole bunch more. If you want me to keep going on this story, let me know. I'd be happy to keep kind of reading through it and commenting and finding more parallels and things. But I just think that's such a cool story. And, you know, like the doctrines that are found there are familiar to me, seem familiar to us in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Might just be a fictional aspect of the story, but it certainly has a familiar ring to it, I guess. And anyway, let me know. I'd be happy to keep going, because this one's certainly one that is interesting. I haven't read it for quite some time. Anyway, talk to you guys soon.